Thank you, everyone, and I'm sorry for being late and keeping you waiting. I'm not sure why I got the wrong time down. But I'm Tamara Barthel. I'm a medium-term trainee for anybody who haven't met, and I am the parent of a 26-year-old adult with autism. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Tamara. My name is Liz Pazdral, and I'm a long-term trainee, and I finished my master's degree, but I'm enjoying this program as sort of a post-grad work, so thank you.
Okay, so here's our disclaimer, and then we want to just give a thank you out to our mentors and classmates, Eden, Kelly, and Aubin. Thank you for everything that you have done for us. It's been amazing. We've learned a lot from you, and all of the faculty at the Mind, and also our amazing Lind classmates. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with all of you. At autism in adult populations, it helps to take a little bit of history first. So I'm going to throw up some trivia questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time for everybody to answer them, but if you know them, you can sort of shout them out to yourself, and I'll go through them pretty quickly, but we'll have some fun. So highest grossing picture in 1994 was Forrest Gump. What fast food feature peaked but will probably never reopen because of COVID? McDonald's Play Places. And who won the American League pennant in 1994? Nobody did. There was a labor strike and the game never got played. So Asperger's syndrome was added to the DSM, and a boy who was diagnosed in 1994 at the age of 5 with Asperger's will turn 32 years old this year. So if we skip forward a little bit, highest grossing picture in 2006 was one of the pirate movies. Social media platform was born and communication medium died. So Twitter started that year and Western Union stopped sending telegrams. And what social movement started with 400 protest actions in more than 200 cities? Immigration reform. In this year, the CDC increased the estimate of autism occurrence, but still didn't formally recognize the disorder as lifelong. And our boy who was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in 2006 at the age of 5 will turn 20 years old this year. Continuing forward to 2014, Best Picture was 12 Years a Slave. Scary viral outbreak, that one was Ebola. And who won the pennant? The San Francisco Giants. The DSM folded all categories into ASD that year and for the first time recognized it as a lifelong impairment. And a boy who was diagnosed in 2014 with ASD level 1 at the age of 5 will turn 12 years old this year. So with that history in mind, let's look at how old our boys are. 32, 20, and 12. And if we look at what we know today, Liz and I are focusing on the prison population, and we'll get into that in a moment. But if you look at the prison population in California, it is aging. Near 25% of prisoners are over 50, average age of men is 40, average age of women is 38. And we also looked in Arizona, and the number of state prisoners age 55 or older in Arizona has doubled every decade in this period of time that we've been talking about. So from that, you can conclude that it's highly unlikely that any of these older people received an autism diagnosis as a child.
So Tamara and I are both invested in the success of neurodiverse adults living in the community. And we hypothesized that certain adults receiving drug and alcohol treatment, behavioral health services, or some within the correctional system may be likely candidates for undiagnosed autism or other untreated neurodevelopmental issues. When we started our research, we found that there was more than enough evidence for each system, and we decided to focus on one, the correctional system. Our literature review showed us that millions of adults are living in the community with autism spectrum disorder. that neurodiverse adults are at higher risk for comorbidities that might put them into the mental health, addiction treatment, or correction system. That there is evidence that interventions can improve people's behaviors in these settings and reduce recidivism. The evidence shows that there are effective interventions for adults. And that's in addition to the benefits of diagnosis, such as awareness, access to treatment, resources, and an identity and understanding of your life. So this, combined with our interests, brought us to our second hypothesis, that the health outcomes for undiagnosed neurodiverse adults could be improved by professionals offering adult mental health services if the professionals had information to help them recognize the signs of autism in their adult populations and tools to guide their clients to the appropriate diagnosis and intervention.
So to test the second part of the hypothesis, we created an informational flyer, and the flyer contained information on what autism is, what the risks are associated with it, what can be done. So what are the effective interventions, and where would you refer a person from your population if you suspected that they might have autism? So the flyer looked like this, and we're happy to share that offline because it's a bit of an eye chart to read through now, but it basically covers these 4 major categories. And then we interviewed and recorded 6 professionals in the California and Arizona state prison systems. And these pictures are not pictures of the actual folks we talked to, they're just stock photos, but we talked to 2 corrections officers, 1 classroom teacher, a parole officer, a nurse working in the prison system, and a social worker. And we asked them before we showed them the flyer, when we mention autism, what comes to mind for you? And we asked them if they thought that autism was a childhood or a lifelong disorder, whether they'd encountered ASD in their population, and whether they'd had any formal training in recognizing, diagnosing, or treating neurodevelopmental disabilities. So then after studying the flyer, we asked them, is there any new information that you learned? Does anything in the flyer change your perception of the behavior of individuals in your population? How many or what percentage of your population do you think might have ASD? Has the flyer changed your behavior or the way that you would react to a person you suspected of having ASD? And what would be the most effective way to receive information like this? And is there anything that we have forgotten?
So a little bit more about our methodology. We got consent from the subjects to be interviewed on Zoom. We recorded the interviews and made transcripts, which we then analyzed and coded. We had closed-ended questions and open-ended questions. For the closed-ended questions, we have some results to share. You can see that the professionals we spoke to all had about the same number of years of experience in their profession, and that none of them were newcomers. You can also see that most of them were aware that ASD is lifelong, but only one of them had training in autism and recognition. Before we showed them the flyer, some of them felt like they had people in their treatment groups who were on the spectrum. After we showed them the flyer, all of them thought that they had people in their treatment groups on the spectrum. After the flyer, we raised their awareness and changed their perceptions. You can see that the perceived percentage, when we asked them to estimate now at the end, what percentage of their population had autism, they came up with a higher number than we would expect from the general population. We also had 4 open-ended questions. So we want to discuss some of those themes. The participants were surprised by the statistics on the flyer that talked about the vulnerability that people on the spectrum have to different kinds of situations. But they also found that the stats made the material more important to them, more meaningful. 5 out of 6 of them want training, but they all prefer in-person one-on-one training. And all of them used a lot of hierarchical language in their discussions and in the jargon that they used with us. They responded to familiar terms from corrections like recidivism. So we believe that future trainings should incorporate their language. Our insights, we got surprised. Most of them thought of autism as a mental illness. And when they were talking about dealing with people on the spectrum, they wanted psych personnel to help them. They were unaware that autistic people can have hurt feelings, be depressed, or anxious. 2 respondents, after participating, felt like one of their coworkers was probably on the spectrum, and one of the participants felt that she herself was on the spectrum. So, conclusions and discussion, autism definitely exists in correction settings. The professionals do not understand the details of the disability. Information, training, and intervention will improve outcomes. The subjects preferred in-person trainings, but the system does not support it. When we researched the training for corrections officers, like the Peace Officer Standards Training in California, it was all video training.
So what we would recommend in next steps is we would love to see the study continued with future LEND trainees to determine are there any relevant differences in other prison systems. We looked at only California and Arizona State. And then would there be other programs like addiction treatment programs or behavioral health where they could benefit from better information in recognizing and referring adults with ASD? But from this study, we would say there's ample evidence to suggest that development of training for prison professionals in California and Arizona would be well received and is definitely needed.
Hi, this is Nancy. I actually have a question and a comment. First of all, this is such a cool presentation. It's just really unique and timely. And I think that we've heard a lot about police being trained in this type of thing, but I hadn't thought about it in terms of the prison system. And also thank you for, setting the stage with the zeitgeist and the period in time where these people would have been diagnosed or missed their diagnosis and where they are now. That was helpful. I wanted to ask, I know you did a lit review, but it seems like it might be, I was thinking about how would I do a lit review for this? Because you're kind of looking at misdiagnoses, right? If I'm understanding. So I wonder if there were any particularly instructive literature that you found, and how could they measure this when it's sort of an unknown? Do you see
So,
what
I'm sorry, Nancy. There were 2 studies in particular that I think responds to your question. There was one in the British health system in Scotland where they tested an autism instrument, a tool to measure or identify autism in prisoners. And they found that it was highly unreliable. They used it across 12 different prisons. There was another study in North Carolina where they looked at the juvenile delinquent system. I'm sorry? They looked at the juvenile delinquent system, and then they compared for people who had IEPs in special education when they were in school for autism or neurodiversity. And so what they found in North Carolina was that their access to the school records helped them to filter out those students and not have them go into the correction system.
Well, thank you.
I just have a really brief kind of comment, and I thank you both for such an interesting project and the research. And I think this is such an undervalued area of study, right, with prison populations and things like, and folks who are at risk. And when I was a LEND fellow a couple of years ago, I actually did a very similar presentation with the juvenile justice system. And I did a training, actually went in and did an in-person training with all the probation officers at the Sacramento County Youth Detention Facility. And I think if you guys are motivated and are interested, I would say the response that I got from the probation officers at the youth detention facility was overwhelmingly positive. They loved the training, they wanted more. It was really fun to work with them. And I think that they, you know, I think in juvenile system is a little bit different than the adult system, but at least in the juvenile system, I think there's such an eagerness to really help these kids and to really do the best that they can to support them. And so it's exciting to see your guys' research on the adult side as well, and that a lot of the people that you spoke to are also pretty motivated to learn more and do more. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marcia, I would be interested in maybe reaching out and talking to you a little bit more about that because, yeah, I could be interested in following up and doing more of that.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free. If you don't have my, I can chat my email. So if anybody's interested in
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
that, yeah.